Test, test. Okay. Good evening. I am Mark Berry, the Director of Parks and Recreation. I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. We are going to be presenting the Community Tree Management Plan. This management plan will, through the data that was collected, and I'm going to let Sarah go into all the details, through the data that was collected, we've been able to identify those parts of the community where there's a lack of trees, those parts of the community where there's an abundance of trees but a lack of diversity, and also we are now able to prioritize tree care. So some of the data that was collected was an assessment of the overall health of the tree. And so all of this information is going to allow us to be more proactive in our tree management than reactive. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Lilly. I'm with EOC Environmental Group, and I've been involved with this project since, last October? We went out there, we started looking at trees and reaching out to the people of Groton. So has anyone here been following the process of the management plan? Tom has. Awesome. You have? Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're all here tonight to hear about it. It's been an awesome project to work on. And I have to say, I live over in Milford, so I'm relatively local. Only took me about an hour to get here today. And I'm just really excited to be here. So let's get into it. And Mark said I have 4 hours, so I hope you have a babysitter if you need that sort of thing. Really? Okay. You can just cut me off, Mark. But first of all, I want to acknowledge the people that helped make this plan possible. Definitely, Mark was a key component, our liaison with the city, various people with the town. Sorry. I'm thinking of Milford City, town of Groton. Both Mark Clayton, Eric Morrison at the golf course, planning and development, Megan Granato was amazing, David Prescott, Deborah Jones at Public Works, Greg Hanover, the director. Noah Fellman I've emailed him a lot with GIS issues and questions, and then the Conservation Commission, Larry and Tom. And then on our team, we have Dr. Rich Hauer as our subject matter expert. I led the project. We have some consultants, a couple of inventory arborists helped us out here, and we have some data management that goes on. So there's a lot of people that put their efforts into making this plan. But even beyond these people, the reason why we're creating this plan and developing it is that trees are a recognized resource to everyone. And it's something that needs to be protected and managed proactively. Trees are wonderful, they're beautiful, they create the character of your town. They can also present a risk if they're not managed effectively. And part of this plan is looking at, what trees are out there, how old they are, what condition, and where trees are not. Who in the community is not enjoying the benefit of trees. And if you live in the town, I'm sure you know the town has a long history with its trees. The Native Americans, the Mashantucket Pequot tribe, their symbol is a tree on a hill, and Mashantucket means wooded knoll, or hill of many trees. The Europeans were first drawn here because of the trees. They wanted to use the eastern white pine for shipbuilding. And that shipbuilding tradition carries forward to today. And the forests here have undergone many changes in the past 400 years, and now we must manage them to what we need them to be and how we want them to act and produce benefits for us today. So that's a little bit of background on the plan and why we're doing it. So the process that went into developing the plan, this is a common process, at least in urban forestry. There's research papers out there on how to develop plans. But basically you start by looking at what do you have? what are your tree resources? And then you go out to the community and you say, what do we want these tree resources to be? What do we want them to do for us? And then, how do you get there? And finally, you want to have a feedback loop because our population is always changing, our trees are always changing, so we always need to revisit this. So, based on those steps, what do you have? We have a tree inventory that now answers that question. We also embarked on community engagement to see what the town of Groton wants out of their trees, and developed the community tree management plan to hopefully get to what you want with the community trees. And then finally, public comments and feedback, like what we're doing tonight. So hopefully, whatever you take in today, you have some comments, some feedback to help improve this plan going forward. So the agenda for today are basically the 4 steps of the project. I have to say that's my daughter. She helped me drop off our proposal when we first started this project. So first of all, the tree inventory. What did we look at for the tree inventory? So we looked at trees in the right-of-way. Those are trees that are outside of private parcels, but not in the road, of course. Trees in selected parks throughout the community, and then trees at publicly owned facilities. And so the majority of these are maintained trees, trees that someone puts care into, someone has planted. For parks trees, it was a little different. We did look at unmaintained trees near high-use structures like playgrounds and pavilions and trails. And we collected the information using iPads. We have a data collection software called FieldNote. It's just a few images of what that looks like. And the information that we collected included the actual physical GPS location and address of each tree, the common name, the genus and species, the tree diameter measured at 4.5 feet in height, canopy dieback, which is an indicator of the tree health and condition. We also mark conditions of concern. So these can be cavities, decay, maybe poor architecture like leaning, poor past pruning practices like utility line pruning. We looked at hardscape issues. If a tree was next to a sidewalk, was it impacting that sidewalk? And any clearance conflicts. These included overhead utility conductors. It also included impeding vehicle and pedestrian traffic and signs, as in this image. As you can imagine, that can be extremely dangerous. And we developed a risk assessment for each tree. And based on this risk assessment, conditions of concern, we are able to make maintenance recommendations for the town of Groton. And of course, we always take comments and make comments and take photos as needed. And actually, I want to pause there. If anyone ever has a question or wants me to reiterate something or slow down or speak up, please just let me know. So at the end of collecting all of this data, which occurred between the end of last year and through May of this year, we counted 3,066 public trees. We also identified planting locations. So these are locations where there is not currently a tree and there are no clearance issues that would prevent a tree from being planted there. And from the data, we're able to pull diversity metrics. So in the town of Groton, we identified 115 unique tree species, which is awesome. I have to say it can be much higher. I think I read a study that said in northeastern states, over 200 species are attainable in an urban setting. And I know these graphs are a little small, but basically it goes over the diversity based on the species on the left, the genus in the middle, and the family of trees on the right. And the reason why that's important is it's a metric that identifies how diverse the tree population is. So if you can imagine, there's a big push for tree diversity out there because we have historical evidence that if you plant all the same kind of species, no matter how beautiful of a street tree they are, there may be an issue that comes up that will decimate your tree population and you have to start over. So that in the past, especially in Connecticut, like New Haven, the Elm City, that's been Dutch elm disease. The recent one that's currently, it's finishing its route through the state is emerald ash borer, but we don't know what the next one will be. So looking at the species, genus, and family of Groton's trees, a general rule of thumb that's used in urban forestry is you should have no more than 10% of one species, 20% of one genus, and 30% of one family. So the red maple makes up 10% of the tree population, and the Acer genus, which are maple trees, makes up 27%. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of maple trees out there. And this just informs the town that going forward, we all love maples, they're beautiful, but maybe they shouldn't be planted as frequently as they have been in the past. We also looked at the size of the trees that were out there. This is based on the diameter at 4.5 feet, and it's an indicator of the size of the trees and also the age of the tree population. So this is a very nice looking graph. The only thing of concern to us was that trees of 1 to 4 inches in diameter, which is all the way on the left, only make up 8.7% of the population. So smaller diameter trees are the ones that are more recently planted. Those are the baby trees out there. So you really want a high number for that because those trees will be the ones replacing all the others in the future. Looking at conditions of concern, there's a picture of a nice leaning tree over there. It's over by the golf course. Happy to report that almost half of trees that we looked at did not have a major condition of concern. And the top one was weak branch unions, which is just maybe a trunk split off into 2 trunks and they're growing close together. It's not ideal architecture, but it's also not an immediate concern. There was some decay and dead tree tops or branches, each making up about 10% of the population. And based on that, we did come up with recommended maintenance for the town. Over half of trees, we did not recommend any action at this time. For about 17% of trees, we said monitor regularly. So those are mostly for trees that might have a condition of concern, but it's not of a high risk. So it might be a cavity that's just forming, but it has good wound wood growing around it, not much decay present. That tree is usually fine to be left and to be inspected later. And I want to bring up something that my husband actually shared with me. He works for Connecticut DOT. And they recently shared an article amongst DOT employees, and there was like a highlighted article about tree deaths in the state. And does anyone want to hazard a guess on the number of people killed by trees in Connecticut in the past 20 years? Any? 5? A little higher. 100? It was actually 86. And the majority of those were tree workers. And so this was a bit of an inflammatory article saying like trees are dangerous, but I don't know if you've seen those traffic signs out there on the road saying the number of car-caused deaths in Connecticut this year. But the last I saw it was over 216. So trees are usually pretty safe. All right. So we also took the tree inventory data and we ran what's known as an iTree Eco analysis. iTree Eco is a software suite that's been developed by the U.S. Forest Service and by Davey Tree Company. And based on the size of trees, where they're located in the country, they can estimate the benefits, ecological and monetary benefits that trees provide. So, out of the trees that we surveyed, they provide over 55 acres of tree cover, almost $17,000 per year in pollution removal. That's usually particulate matter, like those that come off of cars along 95. $579,000 in carbon storage, and $7,500 in carbon sequestration. Those trees produce almost 119 tons of oxygen a year, and 1.1 million gallons of runoff from stormwater is avoided. And there are municipalities out there who place a dollar amount on that avoided runoff and to help fund their tree activities. Because in a lot of communities, that runoff would then go into the stormwater system and have to be treated. And from the trees that we looked at, there was a $13 million replacement value. So if you wanted to replace those trees at the same age, in the same location, it would be $13 million. So that's just reinforcing the idea that maintaining trees, and especially older trees, as they age, trees provide more benefits, is usually more cost effective than removing and replacing. iTree Eco also identified some pests and diseases, and of major concern, or to keep an eye on, are emerald ash borer, which has mostly gone through the community already. But of the remaining trees, we did recommend that they be removed. They were in poor condition. They are not going to be saved. Oak wilt is an emerging concern. It does not yet exist in Connecticut, but it has been identified on Long Island, and it is a huge impact on Midwestern trees. It kills mostly red oaks, which is your northern red oak, pin oak, scarlet oak, black oak, and it's a fungal infection that basically invades wounds on the tree. Spongy moth, they prefer white oaks, and they've been known to defoliate trees, and in times of drought-stressed trees, the trees will die. And beech leaf disease. And again, we didn't identify many beech trees in our inventory. There's this one at Spicer House. They're usually planted as landscape trees in older historical buildings. But they do make up a large component of the natural woodlands in Groton. So something for the town to keep apprised of. So the recommendations that we developed from the tree inventory, we prioritize maintenance for the town. We recommended developing routine monitoring and an inspection cycle. You have a fresh new inventory to work off of, but that will become outdated very quickly as tree work is done, as trees are planted, as storms roll through. And then also create a planting plan. See where the trees are not, see where planting spaces have been identified, and prioritize those locations based on the metrics that the town will create. All right, we'll talk a little bit about community engagement. That was an important aspect of this project because these are Groton's trees. We want to know what the community wants to do with them. So since last year, there have been 5 in-person events, not including tonight. Although one was canceled. One was a hike that was canceled because of weather. So we'll keep it at 5 events. There was an online and paper survey, and that was distributed in both English and Spanish. And we had 92 respondents to the survey overall. And we did find that the respondents, they did match the ethnic makeup of the town of Groton based on 2020 census data, although they did tend to age older. So future efforts might target a younger population. And from the community engagement surveys, 65% responded, having trees in their community or neighborhood is extremely important. 61% wanted more trees in their neighborhood versus 5.6% that wanted fewer. 33% said that since moving to their neighborhood, the tree cover or shade has decreased over time. 9% said it increased. And 30% of respondents estimated they have 50% tree cover or shade. And I kind of like that number because as a state, Connecticut has about 58% tree canopy coverage. So that's probably dead on. And 32% responded that they could see many, 7 to 11 trees from their windows. We asked them about the perceived benefits of trees. And this was an open-ended question. They could write whatever they wanted. But we distilled that down to about 82% thought shade was the most important benefit that trees provide, followed by benefits to the environment, aesthetics, and wildlife. As you're probably all aware, trees are wonderful. They also have drawbacks. The biggest one that was out there was debris from leaves, which, yep, something we have to live with our deciduous forest. Also debris from falling branches and trees. Now that is a big concern, but another potential drawback is lack of maintenance of trees. So with proper maintenance, the risk from falling debris, falling limbs is decreased. And then we left an open comment section at the end. And there was nothing outstandingly negative in those comments, but these are just some that were pulled from there. Some people want more fruit trees. Someone said the town of Groton does a good job of maintaining our trees, which I think Mark is glad to hear. The occasional property damage or down power lines is worth the trade-off for more trees. And we love the beauty of Groton. We love all the trees. So that was really heartening to read these responses. So based out of the community engagement that occurred, Clayton and Megan and Mark, they were out there, they were talking with community members. We came together and we developed this vision statement for Groton's community tree management plan, which is to champion community-led stewardship and amplify diverse voices for resilient and sustainable forest management. All right, so we did all this work, we gathered all this data, and what did we get out of it? So we took the information from the tree inventory, we took all the comments and observations from the community engagement, we used the vision statement as guidance, and from that we've developed goals, objectives, and actions for the town to pursue. And we came up with a nice round number of 10 goals, so that gives you a little expectation on how many slides we have left. So the first was to develop a tree canopy goal. So I mentioned a few times our tree inventory, we looked at trees along streets, we looked at trees in selected parks, we looked at trees at facilities like here at Thrive 55. There are a lot more trees in Groton. There's trees on private property, there's trees in woodland settings. It would be impossible to inventory them all. So a tree canopy assessment provides that data for you. You can do a historical assessment and look at how the canopy has changed over time. The federal government has great aerial imagery that you can use for that. And while we know where exactly some trees are planted and where there are ability to plant more trees, a tree canopy assessment will also let you know how much of private property is plantable. A second goal was to review and update the tree ordinances. So this would mean developing a committee, a board to look at the tree ordinances, to see how they can be improved and how they can work with other community groups in Groton. Goal 3, define and attain equitable distribution of trees. So there's an especially strong push for that right now. It's been shown that in a lot of areas where people have less money, maybe a diversity of ethnic groups, there tend to be fewer trees and fewer benefits from those trees. But there is an increase in asthma, in violence, in crime. Both of those are benefits that trees provide to a community. So this would use the tree inventory data, hopefully tree canopy assessment. You could look at census metrics and decide where exactly are trees needed in Groton. Goal 4, evaluate current tree planting program. So basically looking at what the town is currently doing and identify ways to broaden the tree planting program. Identify grants or resources or tree giveaways that could happen. Goal 5, develop a systematic tree inspection approach. So like I mentioned, you have a fresh new inventory. Now what to do with that? What needs to happen next? We made recommendations, but the town needs to decide what to do with that. Goal 6, create benchmarks for the public tree population. So this basically quantifies all of the data around trees that the town manages. So it would identify, how do they want to continue assessing risk in trees going forward? Identify an inspection cycle for high-risk trees. Identify the number of trees they want to plant a year and in what locations. Goal 7, foster private property tree planting and maintenance. So this could involve going to creating development regulations. So when a development goes in, how many trees should be preserved, how many should be planted. It could mean developing educational material for landowners, both on how to plant trees, what trees could be planted, how to maintain those trees. And then goal 8, community engagement through tree stewardship. Trees are a wonderful resource and benefit to the community. However, they're usually inadequately budgeted for. And many communities rely on volunteers to help out with that. A big push for a tree stewardship program would be to involve the community, provide them training on how to maintain younger, newly planted trees, so that hopefully the trees that are planted will survive into the future. Goal 9, enhance awareness of the importance of trees. This is another community outreach goal, basically saying what is the town doing with its trees, what are the benefits they provide, creating a website that puts all that information out there. And goal 10, align departments and programs towards a tree focus. So I enjoyed talking to Tom on the Conservation Commission before this and hearing how he aligns with different community organizations. So similarly, a tree focus needs to happen there. We need to bring together the different organizations, committees, boards, commissions that work with trees and focus them on these goals. All right. So this is the last step. This is where we need you. We need to hear what you think, what you want to see happen with Groton's trees, and how we can make that happen. So I have a couple of leading questions here. They're pretty basic, so if you have any other ideas or comments, I think Mark and I would love to hear them.
I do want to share a couple of things with you. So, thank you. I do want to share a couple of things with you, just to give you an idea of how we're already using this information. So Megan Granato, who is the Climate and Resiliency Manager, she has been working with us and just wrote a grant and the proposal is to plant 637 trees in Groton. And what we did was we looked at, there's a thing called a tree equity score, and so that identifies what Sarah's been talking about, those areas that don't have enough trees. We also built into the grant, because planting and maintaining 637 trees is way beyond the capacity of the Parks Department at this time. So what we built into the grant is care and maintenance costs for the next couple of years. So, you know, it's critical that the trees get maintained and cared for until the roots can really get established. Megan is an excellent grant writer, and it wouldn't surprise me at all that we get this grant. So that's one thing that we've already done. We also are blessed with a really gifted GIS coordinator, Noah, and he has taken all of this data, and we can pull up and click on a dot on Groton, identify that tree, and we know exactly what tree we're looking at. We know all of the information that Sarah talked about, and then we are also able to record the work that we've been done. So we've got kind of an active database that we'll be able to maintain. So when we take a tree down, like today we took a tree down at Spicer House, that will get updated in the database that we've removed that tree. When we plant trees, those will get added to the inventory. So this is something that we're going to be keeping up. So it's not just going to be a static database. It's, yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to share those two things with you. This isn't one of those situations where somebody does a report and we go, oh man, look at all those pretty pictures, and then we put it up on a shelf. This is something that we're going to be using on a regular basis.
That makes me happy.
Yeah. So I don't know, questions, okay.
Am I supposed to talk in here?
You are.
Does it? Okay. Hi, Kristen DeStante from 82 Irving Street, Mystic. A big concern of mine is invasive species, and I know that probably we are covered with all kinds of non-native things that were all planted with very good intention, 50 whatever years ago. So what kind of attention is being paid to getting rid of invasives that don't belong here and focusing on bringing in natives that support like the whole ecosystem?
Thank you. And that is a major recommendation. We couldn't cover every objective and recommendation here, but we did make a recommendation to develop a tree planting list. I think there's a rough one that we developed earlier this year, I believe, but there would not be any invasives on it.
Non-natives.
What's that?
Non-natives?
Right.
Like
Sorry.
Norwegian spruce or whatever it is, blue spruce?
Oh.
No,
I mean, there would definitely be a push for natives.
a push.
Right.
Oh, so that's not exclusively natives.
I mean, that is for the town to decide, but as far as removing invasives, we didn't see many invasive like ailanthus out there. Calorie pear, I mean, they're slowly dying out. They haven't been planted in a while, fortunately. Luckily, their reign is dwindling. But definitely native trees are promoted and recommended to be planted.
So how can we get this slideshow so we can respond, think about it and respond?
Oh, that might be a question for Mark.
So this is all being recorded?
We don't know the question or what you're saying.
Question again?
So will this be on your website, Mark, so we can look at it, think about it, and make comments?
Yes, this is being recorded on the community television station. So
No, I
you
meant
can.
the slideshow. The
Oh,
slides.
yes, that will also be available as part of the video that you can watch
Okay,
to see to see what Sarah was talking about.
okay,
Yes, yeah.
because it's hard to think of everything.
Yeah, and we can actually post on the department webpage the entire community management plan so that you can look through it, because like Sarah said, there's a number of recommendations that go on for pages, and so you can look at that in more detail and provide comment on those recommendations.
Okay,
So we will put that up on the Parks and Recreation Department webpage.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
You mentioned that you can access information about individual trees. Can we also do that?
Yeah, I think we could, well, we have to be careful. I'll have to look into that because we don't want anybody manipulating the information on the database. So we may have to provide a static database available to the public, because we wouldn't want somebody going in and making changes to that database. So I'll have to check with Noah about exactly how we would do that.
I don't know if you would know this, but at one point I was told that there was going to be a tree planted at the John Kelly statue.
Yes,
And I wonder if that's still going to happen. There was one there. I think it got damaged and they took it out, but
right. And it's actually was just delivered on Monday to the, yes, to the Parks office, and we just haven't had a chance to plant it yet. I think the weather's supposed to be cooler starting next week, and I think that will be a better time to put the plant in. Versus, we've had a long stretch of warm, dry weather, and that creates some challenges. So, but yes, to answer your question, we have purchased, and the tree has been delivered.
great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have a microphone, but I can talk loud. I was wondering. Okay, then I don't have to yell. I was wondering if on the boardwalk, there's a lot of trees on both sides of the boardwalk and shrubs. If they could trim those back more often, because the handicap, when we ride our scooters down there, we get caught on the overhanging limbs and what have yous, and it's very difficult.
Excuse me, where's this boardwalk?
So I think she's referring to the boardwalk along the Pequannock River. Yes, so it starts at Depot Road and goes all the way out to Route 1. And it's,
Down by Groton Human Services,
yes,
and then out.
yeah, right across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it starts at by the playground on Depot Road and goes all the way out, and goes all the way out to Route 1. Yes, so that's right along the Pequannock River. There are a lot of grasses that grow up. That's a great environment. They grow quickly and constantly, and we get out there as often as we can to try to keep it cut back, because I know when we cut them, they grow back quickly. And just to let you know, this is a little bit off track, but we do have grant money, and we'll be looking at actually widening that, removing that boardwalk and widening it. There'll be an extensive permitting process, I'm sure, but our goal is to try to widen that so that it's more inviting and, especially for like two-way traffic on that. Because that boardwalk is 25 to 30 years old, and yeah, it's a beautiful spot, yeah.
I was interested in Goal 7 and wondered if Groton still has a tree warden.
Yes, the Public Works, the tree warden works for the Public Works Department,
Okay,
yes.
because 10 years ago, we were very involved with the tree warden when Fairview expanded to Thames Edge and received directives on what could be planted. And most of those trees, well, I'd say probably 90% of those trees have done well, the others did not. But
Yeah, and the town also has an arborist on call. So if there's, a lot of the issues that the tree warden deals with is, I'm concerned about this tree, I'd like it taken down. So the tree warden will come out and make an assessment. he's not a trained arborist. If there's any type of question, we bring in the arborist who is trained in that profession and makes the determination whether we should leave the tree or if it needs to come down.
So maybe I misunderstood the function of the tree warden. I was thinking that the tree warden consulted with developments, because we have a lot of that going on in town right now, on what is an appropriate tree planting plan for that space.
Yeah, I don't believe that the tree warden is, the current responsibilities that fall on the tree warden, I don't think include making a determination of what type of species of trees should be planted where. It's primarily maintenance, like the example that I gave, does the tree need to be removed? Should it stay? They're not really involved in the planning process of where and what trees and the number of trees should be planted. But this is, the information that's coming out of this, we will be able to share with the planning department who, when a proposal comes in for a development or whatever, they'll have the list of preferred tree species and all of that information in order to include in the permitting process.
So the permitting process would include what trees, required trees, if appropriate to the development, and have some control over what is going to be planted?
Yes, they would have the information to say, we've got too many red maples or too many maples, and our recommendation in this area is not to plant a red maple, but to plant X or Y. Yeah.
Thanks.
So the planning commission does require developers to plant trees at this point?
I'm not in the planning department, but it's my understanding that as part, when like a proposal for a development comes in, they have to plant a certain number of trees a certain distance apart. And previously, I don't believe there was any guidance on the types of trees, which is, I think, why we are seeing an abundance of red maples for street trees. And now with the information that we have, we'll be able to hopefully diversify the trees that are planted, which is a more healthy for the trees. I can just share, so when when Thrive was built in 2011, 2012, there was a number of ash trees that were planted. 2 years ago, we lost 20 trees around Thrive. And since then, we've been replacing them, but with a diversity of trees. I mean, if you look at the trees that are out there now, there's a much greater diversity. Before, there was a high number of both pear trees and a high number of ash trees. And of course, we all know what's happened to the ash tree population. So this is just kind of a perfect example of why you don't want to plant all the same type of trees in the same area. And then I'll get to you.
You mentioned, Sarah, thanks for your presentation on all this work. You mentioned also that there are certain species being impacted by disease. Are there also certain species that are facing additional heat stress from climate, just prolonged high temperatures that we need to be aware of and be proactively thinking about how to work around?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. Yes, there are some trees that are being stressed out of the community. Sugar maple is an example. It's just too warm in the winters for sugar maple, and if you see them out there, they're the first to turn in the fall, and they're beautiful, but there's no new ones coming up. They're all dying out. So yes, that is a thought. And it would be recommended to develop a planting list to think of that, to think of maybe more southernly type species. And I know recently the USDA recently changed their agriculture zones, so we're all getting a little warmer, and I think Groton might be 7B, 7A. But because of that, different species of trees are recommended for being planted. Thanks.
On number 3, on the last slide that you had, no, not the goals, the last slide that you had, 1, 2, 3, yes. On number 3, you have, what about Groton? What should Groton be doing with its trees? Now, I'm asking or making a statement of what should Groton do with the trees they cut down? Okay, that's where my statement's going to come from. Where my brother lives in Northern California, they use their cut down trees to help the needy for their heating. And it goes like at Groton Human Services. And Groton the services would tell them where the cut trees were and where they were cut already for firewood, okay? And they could go get so much or have that delivered to them.
I love that interpretation of that question. I was talking to someone earlier about urban wood reuse, and what you're talking about is what's known as a firewood bank, and that does occur throughout New England. There's several in Connecticut. It's something that the town could definitely look into. That and also, using wood for other purposes, for building furniture, for workforce development. If there is a tech school nearby that does cabinetry, that could be an option as well.
There's actually a private group in New London Trees or something like that. And they have worked out a deal with New London where if people want a tree in their own yard, the city will help them dig and plant it. And that encourages people to put in trees because they're expensive. And then they also have, they've developed a lot of areas where they have put in trees on public property, but the people in the group help the town maintain them. They water them, and they have a whole cadre of volunteers who go out and help with the trees. So something to look into in Groton, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, the 10 goals are up there, but each of those had objectives and then action items below them. And there was something similar in there, I promise. Developing ways to help homeowners identify trees that they can plant, educational materials so they can plant and maintain their tree, and also looking into, like what you just mentioned, assistance, like maybe someone isn't able to plant a tree because they are pretty heavy. But plant a tree, and then also potentially looking into how to identify funding to help maintain trees. Because trees are really expensive to maintain. And that goes into the equity factor as well. Some people can't afford to maintain trees, so they say, I don't want a tree. Please don't plant a tree, because I don't want the leaves, I don't want to prune it. So that's definitely something to look into. Thank you.
I'd like to know what the criteria are for taking down a mature tree. And I would also like to know about this tree that came down at this Spicer Mansion, which I'm not sure where it is, but I assume the tree was an old tree.
I'm curious as well.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the tree that came down at Spicer Mansion, so I can't answer that question. And as far as criteria for making a determination whether a tree needs to be taken down, I think Sarah can probably go through a whole litany of items that are considered when making that decision.
Yeah, and I assume that the arborist for Groton is a certified arborist licensed through Connecticut. And also it helps to go through tree risk assessment training through the International Society of Arboriculture. And basically when looking at trees, at least by the ISA system, you look at the defects, the targets, so what would be affected if the tree were to fail, how often that target is occupied. So if it's a playground, you know, how often is it occupied? And then the likelihood of that defect failing and the likelihood of it impacting that target. And then they have a couple of fun matrices that you can look at, and based on that, it develops a risk rating to work off of. So for the inventory that we did, we actually used a different system. It's put out by the USDA Forest Service, and it also considers like clearance issues. So I could go into a lot of detail for that, and I'm not sure exactly what the arborist did and what they looked for at Spicer House, but I am curious because I looked at all those trees and I want to know which one came out.
Well, I'd like to say one more thing about old trees. I mean, I revere old trees, and you know, I once went to Confucius burial site in China, and going to the cemetery, the road is lined with ancient trees, and some of these trees are so hollowed out that they've propped up the trunks. They've even filled the cavities with concrete so that tree keeps standing. And you know, that really struck me, that you know, that kind of reverence for an ancient tree. My feeling here in Groton is that kind of reverence is really lacking, and that you know, that it's very kind of cold-blooded the way a tree is assessed and taken down, and it really hurts the feelings of people who love trees to see ancient or really old growth trees come down. And there seems to be no historic protection for old growth trees that are healthy. And also the thing about the interface between Groton and the state of Connecticut, I don't know what it is, but I live on Route 1 in Mystic, and the state did a reinforcement of a wall that holds up the road. That the wall actually is on my property, but they actually bought the strip of land next to the wall, or sort of forced me to sell it actually. And there were trees, there are old growth trees there, and they wanted to just cut them down without any assessment of those trees. It's like, those are in the way, let's take them down. So, you know, this kind of attitude is very anti-tree. And I don't see trees as just statistics or data. And, you know, and I think that should be taken into account, you know.
Yeah, and I would speak for myself, not for the town of Groton, but I agree. Mm-hmm. I would think there could be an artistic component to this plan and to the activities in Groton if you have an active artist community. You know, identify trees that people connect with, you know, have children draw pictures of them, have people write poems about them, paint pictures. I've lived in several communities, one in California where they did something like that, where someone nominated a tree every week and a local artist would paint its picture. I know I live in Milford, and we have, I think it's called the Notable Tree Program, where you can nominate neighbors for a distinctive, beautiful tree. And then they get, you know, a little award from the city every year. So I agree. I think there should be more
But for
appreciation.
me, it's they're more than artistic. They're spiritual, you know, and that's the thing I have found in the past, you know, probably 15 years that, and it's not just the town. I mean, it's private. You know, the private people who want to see the water, so they take down an old growth tree because it's in the way of the water. To me, this is unconscionable. It really is. It's the tree is so beautiful. Why is it sacrificed so that they get a glint of water? I cannot understand why they cannot see a tree as equally beautiful as the ocean, you know, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had another comment. Just food for thought, and it could potentially save money out of your budget. When we talk about tree debris, we're talking about leaves falling in the fall, and I'm real involved in the pollinator pathway movement. And of course, you know, those leaves, all that muck that's all over the lawns, that's where the moths are laying the eggs. That's where the caterpillars are going to emerge that are going to feed the birds in the spring. So if you could take, like, for example, instead of viewing it as, oh, this is dirty, we have to mow it, we have to rake it, we have to clean it, take half the Spicer Mansion lawn. Let's leave this with leaves. Let's let those leaves just stay there. You'd save a lot of money with your guys, and it would really do a lot of good for the environment. So I would love to see that as a component in your plan. That let's change our aesthetic about what we want to do with that debris from the trees, because it's gold.
Here, here.
Yeah,
Mark's writing it down.
good, Mark. Saves money.
Saves
That's the big
money.
thing. Dollar signs.
Anyone?
Since we're talking trees, this isn't really Groton, but does anyone understand why the state is completely ripping out all the trees on I-95? I mean, they have huge machines that are taking out the trees and all the shrubs and everything right there at between 89 and 90.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I've seen what you're talking about, and I was going to say my assumption is it's a safety issue.
100 trees,
no.
86 trees. Right?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
They
again-
always use that excuse, you know? And I
Well-
can't believe all those trees are diseased or a safety issue. They did it in Stonington, too. On Route 1, they cut down all the trees that were near the roadway
Right.
because I'm sorry to sound, combative, but to me, it seems like some bureaucrat somewhere just decided this would be a cool thing to do, like renumbering exits on the highway. They've got nothing better to do than to wreck the environment, and it's very, very, very upsetting.
Yeah, I'm not going to do any more speculating.
No, I know. I mean, I know it's the state,
Yeah.
but it's very upsetting.
Agree.
I didn't even know about this.
All right. Seeing no other questions, I think we'll wrap this presentation up. Again, I will post on the department webpage the full management plan. If folks would like to look at that and make comments, we will be going to the town council to look to them to adopt this. So I would suggest that if you're going to look at this, you do it sooner rather than later, because we're slowly approaching our budget season, and some of the recommendations from this plan could potentially impact the budget. So if you've got feedback to share, please look at that. We'll get it posted up before the week is over, and you can reach out to me with your comments or suggestions on the plan.
Could I say one last thing?
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify about what I said about the state wanting to take down my trees, the old growth trees, to fix the wall. The thing was, they wanted to do it to expedite the project without assessing the trees. So I basically had to fight back. And arborists, they finally sent arborists to assess the trees. Every single one of those trees was healthy. And they were just going to wantonly chop them down. So, I mean, it's such a struggle,
Thank you. I did put my contact info up there as well if you'd like to reach out to me. And this is a personal fun fact. I'm actually riding in the Tour de Trees next week, which is a 420-mile bike ride to benefit the tree fund.
Wow.
I'm regretting this decision right now, but
Where?
it is what it is.
Where?
It starts in Stamford and rides over to Rhode Island, Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and back to Providence. So it's
How long does it take?
5 days.
You'll love it. It's going to be great.
It'll be
Wow,
fun.
that sounds fantastic.
So are you collecting money?
I'm not doing that as part of this presentation, but it is to benefit the Tree Fund and the Arbor Day Foundation. But thank you for all your comments tonight, and
Yeah,
definitely look
excellent
out for Mark's
comments. Thank you.
posts.
Thank you.
Thank you.